Leftist Gun Terrorism next on The Michael Newman Show. There we go. A little hang up there. I know when that happened. How you doing? Michael Newman Show here. You know, the Democrats and the left, anyone that can squeeze out a tier of monetary gain in the wake of this Las Vegas shooting are nothing more than terrorists. You see, terrorism is not about death, it's about fear, and the left uses fear generated by an attack like this, any attack, in fact, that involves a gun, as a way to gain political advantage over you. When a madman takes a gun out and kills people, you become emotional. In the case of Las Vegas, it's very understandable. Something that feels like it could happen to you. Anger, fear, remorse, righteousness, all powerful feelings drummed up from this event. And the left tries to use those. The leftists, the Democratic Party, they use those things as a way to convince you to give them more of your stuff, more power. They're vampires, I tell you, and wish nothing more than to suck the lifeblood out of your freedom. That's how I feel. And that's exactly what's happening today. We'll get to it in just a second. First, I am here. Oh, that's the wrong page. That's the correct page. Yeah, that's my website, michaelnewmanproductions.com. If you go there, that's what you're going to see. Pretty cool stuff. You can contact me, check out the services link for the things that I can do for you. Support the show. Most importantly, if you click there, it tells you what Patreon is and how you can become a part of supporting this program. Also, you can keep in contact with me both on the website by clicking the contact link and, of course, Facebook and all that stuff. But my Twitter handle is Newmaniac1. Love to hear from you and love to have you get the tweets. It's a great way to know when new stuff comes out because immediately tweet it and it goes out and you know what's going on there. And most importantly, please, please, please support the show. It's the only way I stay in business over here. Patreon.com/MNP. That is how you support the show. And it's very, very, very important. It gets much more difficult around here to do the show without your help, my friends. All right. What a wonderful show we have in store for you. Scary, horrible things have been happening for, well, a couple of days now since the weekend. We're learning a little bit more about this Stephen Paddock guy. Strangely seems like kind of a normal guy. 64, he opened fire at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival in Las Vegas and killing 59 people at this point and injuring 527. So a major shooting event. Of course, everybody's reaching out and contacting people. There's a brother named Eric. He said his family had no idea what would make him shoot, what would make him snap like this. The man had no military background. Apparently, he was a gambler. He liked to bet big, wagering of tens of thousands of dollars in a sitting. He owned homes in 4 states, but preferred staying in casino hotels. I own 4 houses. I just hang out at the casino. Okay, something's wrong with you there. And he would do it for sometimes weeks at a time. And he loved the gambling machines as well. Now, strangely enough, maybe it has something genetic to do with the guy. I don't know. But the father of this man, a guy named Benjamin Hoskins Paddock, was a diagnosed psychopath and a bank robber who escaped federal prison in the late 1960s. He was a serial felon. He had been locked up in the 1960s for robbing an Arizona bank, escaped in 1968, and spent nearly 3 years on the run before the FBI caught up with him in Las Vegas in 1971, at which point he tried to run down the agent with his car, according to archives of the Tucson Daily Citizen. Yeah. And, of course, still, investigators are trying desperately to establish a motive for this retired accountant. Yesterday, when I started the show, I told you that this thing was going to turn political quick. We also know that politics isn't far behind after this attack, my friends. Reporters are already looking and asking for a motive, a reason why this man decided to kill. I, on the other hand, ask for a motive from the media. I call for an answer of why, at this point in time, you're looking for a motive for this guy. Already, I mean, the bodies aren't even cold yet. It's mere hours after this whole thing is done. Why are you looking for a motive right now? Well, I can answer that question simply by saying it's because you're hoping that the motivation for this crime will be something that you can use politically, something that you can use to forward an agenda. And there you go. That's what we're seeing today. And this thing happened Sunday, early Monday morning. It was after midnight, I do believe. And already, this is Tuesday, and it started early this morning. It started last night. We'll get to Jimmy Kimmel's little crying, weeping monologue in just a moment. But politicians are out in force trying to push their own strategy. Yes, we're going to be using this to push something that they've tried to push on the American people many times before, and we just haven't bought it. Representative Nancy Pelosi penned a letter to Republican Majority Leader Representative Paul Ryan demanding that the GOP convene a congressional committee to study gun violence. Has that ever been done before, and has it done anything? Look, people, this is what you get with big government. You get a bunch of people, well, we'll have a committee, and then they can go on and say, hey, we worked on the problem, but nothing ever gets solved. That's what they want to do. That's the Pelosi's of the world that have no answers. In Pelosi's letter, it calls for Congress to consider beefing up background checks. And what does that mean? How are you going to beef up the background check? This guy apparently passed all the background checks. What other information you want on there? I'll tell you what information they want on there. They want, and this is very slick, they want to take your Second Amendment rights and hand it over to an unelected body that gets to decide what a disease is. What am I saying? Psychiatrists, the people that decide if you're crazy or not, it's just their opinion. And the diagnostic manual that they use is voted on. There's no science involved, okay? And they want to take that group of people and empower them with your Second Amendment rights. So if they decide, if this board decides for whatever reason that you're mentally incompetent, you are no longer a human being at that time. You are no longer a citizen at that time, and they get to take away your rights immediately, and you have no recourse. You're crazy. Why should we listen to you? I would imagine that's the sort of beefed up background checks that she's looking for. Common sense legislation to curb the use of firearms. We must respond to these tragedies with courage, unity, and decisive action. Why must we? Why must we? I mean, okay, I'll agree with courage. We should have the courage to march forward hand in hand in freedom versus handing over more power to the federal government that doesn't work anyway. Let me tell you something. Okay, a person that's on about killing people is not going to give a good goddamn about what the law is regarding firearms. They're going to either retain them and use them, or they're going to use some other means to kill people, so the number of bodies dead, cold, and in the ground isn't going to change. But what it does do is give the government even more power over you. There's no possible way you can fight back at that point. There's no way you can defend yourself. And by the way, there's no way you can escape and evade. They've taken away all your power, not as a citizen, but as a human being. They've taken away your ability to defend yourself, period. And don't misunderstand me. That's what they want to do. They want the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, all of their ilk, the Hillary Clintons of the world, want to reduce you to nothing more than a slave with no human value. That's what progressivism is about. You understand, you're beneath them. So you should not have a say, and they're angry. filled with vitriolic anger because you actually have a say and some rights in this country, and they want to end that. And these are the types of incidents that are the train track that leads you right to tyranny. It's exactly what's happening. Don't doubt me on this. And, of course, the media is getting into the game here. MSNBC, the reporter there appeared to advocate for the creation of a national gun registry. Isn't that nice?
But the other issue is it's not easy for the ATF to trace gun ownership in this country. There is no national gun database to trace the serial numbers quickly to an owner. It often takes them a long time because they are dealing with paper records and in some cases microfilm at an agency in Martinsburg, West Virginia. There's been a lot of reporting on this, Brian, because...
Okay, understand that he's saying it's not impossible. He's saying that it's very difficult. They have to look up papers and they have to look up microfilm. So probably microfiche, I would imagine, because microfiche is better than microfilm. And that's just too hard. That's his entire point.
Of pressure from the gun lobby and congressional restrictions, the ATF has difficulty tracing gun ownership, and that may be one of the reasons we don't yet know whether there was a machine gun, and if so, who sold it to this perpetrator.
And Ken, will we ultimately find out about all of the weapons in that room, or may some of them could have been a cash untraceable transaction?
It's likely that we will find out the particulars on whether there was a modified machine gun. The ownership is traceable generally. It just takes longer than most investigators would like to see happen.
Okay, so we can find the guy currently. It's just not quite fast enough. Let me ask you a question from a tactical sense. What's the purpose in knowing where the gun came from in this investigation? The guy's never going to shoot anybody ever again. He's dead. So we've got all the time in the world to track his guns and to figure out where he bought them, who he bought them from. As a matter of fact, from an investigative standpoint, it might be a fairly good idea that let's say that he bought a gun recently and this guy's picture was flashed all over the internet and all over TV, and the person that sold the gun to him sees the guy and is scared to death that cops are going to come to his house because he doesn't know what their intentions are going to be. Well, it might be a good idea to let the whole thing calm down just a little bit and then catch that person by surprise. You might get a little bit more information out of them that way, and people might not, if somebody disappears that happens to be a witness, if you give a little time, maybe they'll come back. Maybe they have ties. Maybe they have a reason to come back, and they didn't know that somebody was still tracking them. So from an investigative and tactical standpoint, it's not necessarily a bad idea to wait just a little bit. So his entire argument here is the system that we have currently in place is not fast enough, even though in this instance, the system doesn't need to be any faster than it already is. And let me tell you something. It's not about investigating a crime and how fast that goes. It's about having a digital database, which is far more powerful than, microfiche and paper, having a digital database that allows for quick mass calculation of data, meaning they can decide at some point in time, they can just decide, okay, we want to get rid of all the AR-15s that have been sold legally in this country. We don't care what the Second Amendment is. Then they can simply go through their paperwork in a matter of seconds and find every AR-15 sold, what its registry number is, and who it was sold to. And then they're going to send out a little bulletin to local police. And next thing you know, you've got SWAT teams knocking down your door, throwing flashbangs into your baby's crib, which the cops do, and shooting your wife or your children or your dog or possibly you. That is the ultimate goal of this, because they hate you. Now, we're going to hear a lot, matter of fact, he just said it, a lot about the NRA here, those dirty people at the NRA. The NRA, all these groups that the left likes to demonize, all these groups and people, for instance, and I've said this many times about Donald Trump. Donald Trump when the left says it, is not Donald Trump. The NRA, when the left says it, is not the NRA. They're using those terms to talk about you. They hate you. I don't have a problem with the NRA, but I've never given them any money. Matter of fact, I like the NRA. I think they do good work. I'm just not a real big joiner. You know what I'm saying? And I'm, poor most of the time. So I've never given them any money. But our political motivations are aligned. So when you say bad things about the NRA, you're saying bad things about me. Personally, sitting in this little house in Topeka, Kansas, talking to people on the internet. They hate me and everything I stand for. And if you don't think they will come for you and kill you and your family, you're insane. That's just the way it is. And it continues. It's not just one guy. Oh, no. I thought Tom Brokaw was dead. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought he was dead. I mean, he sounds like he should be dead. Apparently, he's not dead, though. He was on MSNBC, and he pushed for further erosions of the Second Amendment protections of gun rights, keeping to bear arms on Monday morning in his analysis of the mass shooting.
And unable to go anywhere.
Well, I think this is time for a national dialogue that we can have in a calm and reasoned way in which the country can figure out how come we have so many mass shootings in this country. Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, Columbine, many more people were killed in those than the two terrorist attacks that we had in San Bernardino and Orlando, which understandably got us so aroused about the threat of terrorism. You listen to those weapons, they're on full auto at that point. Where did he get that kind of a gun? You can now get an AR-15, which is a modification of a military weapon, an M1.
No, it's not. It's a modification of an M16.
But it's supposed to be a single shot at a time, but it has a big capacity. I go to a gun store in Montana. I've owned guns all my life. And it used to have mostly 30-30s and high-powered sporting rifles. Now they got racks of these adapted military weapons. Stan McChrystal, who led our forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, said we ought not to be selling these kinds of weapons to the American civilian population that
Why?
are designed to do one thing, which is to kill people. And they can be adapted. So we need to have that kind of a dialogue in this country. No other Western nation has a number of gun deaths that we have in America, and we need to talk about it.
It's not a gun problem. It's a people problem, because there are far more AR-15s and these adaptable rifles within circulation in the hands of people that do nothing wrong with them than there are in the hands of people that do things wrong with them. That is the truth. And by the way, throughout this entire gun debate that hasn't changed since I've been knee-high to a grasshopper, there's never been a new argument in this, save me, by the way. And we'll get to that argument here in just a second. Matter of fact, no. We'll do it right now. Let me explain something to you about guns. Guns are as natural as breathing. They are a human extension of teeth and claws. That's what guns are. No matter what type of gun it is, it's an extension of teeth and claws. You see, we develop big brains and not big muscles, teeth, and claws to defend ourselves with and to hunt with and to use as tools in the environment around us. No, we developed technology. It started with rocks, went to sticks. Next thing you know, you got a bow and arrow, a slingshot, a whole bunch of stuff, and it culminates to this point in the modern-day firearm. It is our teeth. It is our claws. It is not only our right to have these things, it is our humanity that we're protecting by having them. When the government comes in and takes your guns away from you, they are telling you that you are no longer a person, that you are no longer human. That's why the Second Amendment needs to stay in place. If you believe in humanity, if you believe in some semblance of equality, individuality, if you believe that the human condition has worth, you cannot take guns from people, because the second you do, you're telling them they're not human, period. And this argument, I'm sorry, is correct, and it works in every scenario. I don't care if half the population died at gun violence. Doesn't matter. If the government walks in and says you can no longer have these guns, then you are no longer human. And if you're not human, God knows what they'll do to you. Hopefully, they'll just kill you. But generally, they like to have fun with your body before that. They like to hear you squeal. Mr. Brokaw. And it continues. Brian Williams starts it off with a different sort of tactic. And it's a type of tactic the leftists use all the time. And it's pointed at the heartstrings. And it's pointed at people. Basically, he's taking everybody that owns, has, and believes in the Second Amendment, and making them the bad guy. He's saying, I hate everybody in the Midwest. I want you all to die. You deserve it because you're bad people. That is what he's saying by making his point.
Changes.
The grip, in fact, stranglehold.
Let's restart this.
Why don't we act? What is the problem? What was it about first graders losing their lives that wasn't sad enough to result in changes?
The grip, in fact, stranglehold of the NRA and other special interests on the congressional process has undermined our efforts, in fact, blocked them. But I really believe that we can honor these victims and we can arrive at a tipping point where we change America, and America will feel the same fury that I felt watching these images.
And it's always good policy when you make decisions when you're angry, is it not? And that's the best time to do it. When you're at a heightened emotional state, that's when you make the best decisions within your life. Is that right? You're just a bad person. What was it about dead babies that the Republicans still want guns? Those jerky jerksons? God, I hate you people in the Midwest that vote for your guns and your Bibles, and we should just end you. That is the left. That is essentially their argument here. In this instance, all of the laws regarding guns were put in place and used and enforced, and they didn't work. It shows that government can't stop all crime. It shows that bad things, regardless of what sort of preparation you come up with, will continue to happen through life. You cannot predict it. And it also shows that no matter how tight you make security, people will get through. Terrorism should have taught us that. Security is super tight. I mean, we get thumbs in every orifice of our body when we go into an airport, yet they can't stop terrorism. They can't do it. Oh, and by the way, people, whether it's a terrorist attack or not, people still die in airplanes. Sometimes it's just, oh, wait a second. Sometimes it's just a crazy German guy who decides he wants to die, and he wants to take everybody in the plane with him. Oh, you know what? We can't. This is such an awful. Look at all these airplanes that have been terrorized, how many people have died, and if one little thing goes wrong, you go right out of the sky into the ground, and everybody dies in a fiery ball of hell. We have to ban airplanes. We can't have airplanes anymore. Look what this guy did. You remember that story? The captain of the plane got up to go to the restroom. He gets up and leaves, and the co-pilot there locks the door behind him, disables the keypad so the guy couldn't get back in. Now, because of terrorism, they're all bulletproof doors, and there was no way for them to force the door down. And he just basically set the autopilot to slowly go into the ground. So it took quite a bit of time. Everybody on that plane knew that they were going to die. That's pretty awful. And he killed more than, was it 200 people? It was like 270? I don't know. I'd have to look. And a couple of hundred people. But you know what? That's not bad because he didn't use a gun. They didn't use guns on 9/11 either. They didn't use guns on 9/11 either. Just want you to remember that. Guns aren't by far the most dangerous thing that we have to worry about in our society, and the tears will not stop for the dead simply because you remove from people their Second Amendment rights. Now, I cut this down. It's like 9 minutes long, and I couldn't stand to watch it for 9 minutes. But there's just a little section in here we'll play from. At the beginning, Jimmy Kimmel's just, people died. And I say it that way because of this. Jimmy Kimmel's ratings suck, and he's getting a lot of play out there with his political commentary. It's a marketing maneuver. So when Jimmy Kimmel goes out and starts crying about his kid and healthcare and starts crying about people dead, understand it's simply to make more money. That's why he's doing it. This is Jimmy Kimmel from his show.
Of high-powered rifles and use them to shoot people. The guy was an accountant. He had no criminal record. His brother, who lives in Florida, seems totally shocked, genuinely dumbfounded. He said he saw no sign of any of this. The owner of the store that sold the killer some of the rifles said he passed the government-mandated background check when he was in the store. He wasn't on any watch list. Didn't seem to have been a religious or political extremist. Came out of nowhere. And because of that, because there weren't any of the usual signs, you know, I've been reading comments from people say this is terrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. But I disagree with that intensely, because of course there's something we can do about it. There are a lot of things we can do about it, but we don't, which is interesting because when someone with a...
Okay, but what can we do about it in this instance? What exactly? Well, there's a ton of things we could do. But what? What is he saying? He's saying take everybody's guns away. That's all we have to do. We just have to take their guns away. Oh, look, you little people don't need no guns anymore. We're going to take those away. Oh, yeah, look how good it's going to be. In this instance, the only thing you could have done to a person that has never had any contact with the police, was a millionaire, by the way, and we had no reason to think that he would do this. No reason to think he would be on the top of a list in any system of people that would be able to get guns, especially because he's worth a couple of $1 million. And rich people get whatever the hell they want. Right? Except for this rich guy killed a bunch of others instead of some of the other rich guys out there that just kill themselves. Just something a little bit different in his head.
Beard attacks us. We tap phones. We invoke travel bans. We build walls. We take every possible precaution to make...
Okay, so is that what you're talking about? Is that what you want to do? Is for everybody that has a gun now, you become the enemy of the state because you have a gun, because you've expressed your Second Amendment rights? We're going to break into your home. We're going to tap your phones. We're going to do everything that we want to you because you are now an enemy of the state and we hate you? Is that your answer to this problem?
Sure, it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun and kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that. And Second Amendment, I guess, are...
Second Amendment, I guess, and I don't know what that's all about. What about the people that buy guns illegally and shoot all up in Chicago? You know, I want you to understand something very key here. What happened in Las Vegas was tragic. It was horrible and tragic. But far more people have died in Chicago in a weekend than died in Las Vegas. It happens all the time. Okay? People die all the time, and you do not get all weepy on your show about it. The reason you're getting weepy about this event is because it's news, it's popular, and you, as a terrorist, can use the emotions that this event evokes for your own political and monetary gain, you goddamn vampire.
Forefathers wanted us to have AK-47s, is the argument.
No, the argument is a gun is a gun. And back in the day, there weren't a whole lot of choices in guns, right? Technology was at a certain point. But guess what? If you were in the United States, you could have the greatest military technology at the time. Meaning, if you were to translate it to today, as guns in the very beginning were also there as a hedge against an over-empowering government. If you wanted to transfer that logic to today, I should have an M1 Abrams tank in my backyard, and it should be perfectly legal. Or actually, an A-10 Warthog would be fun. I always like those, and they've got a big Gatling gun on the front of that. It's not because they realized that their guns weren't all that dangerous, so you could have a gun. That wasn't their point. The guns that they had at the time were the pinnacle of military fighting technology, and they allowed everybody to have it in that context because they knew it was important for free people. You do not get it. And you do not wish people to be free because, you know, you've already gotten to the ruling class. You've got yours. And to hell with the rest of us.
I assume Orlando, Newtown, Aurora, San Bernardino, every one of these shootings, the murder used automatic or semi-automatic rifles, which are not weapons you use for self-defense. They're weapons designed to kill large numbers of people in the shortest possible amount of time. And this guy reportedly had 10 of them in his room, apparently legally. At least some of them were there legally.
We don't know anything about that.
Why is that allowed? I don't know why our so-called leaders continue to allow this to happen. Or maybe a better question, why do we continue to let them to allow it to happen? 5 people got shot in Lawrence, Kansas last night. 3 of them died. It didn't even make a blip.
Right. It didn't even make a blip because it happens all the time, and it wasn't a terrorist. It wasn't an attack that created a whole bunch of fervor nationally. So people weren't unhappy and people weren't scared. So you couldn't use it as a terrorist attack. You couldn't use it as a political jumping off point. So no one talked about it. No one talked about it. And by the way, if your argument were to be, you know what, I'm done with you, by the way. I just can't do it anymore, my friend. If your argument were to be true, if you were to actually believe that, if you were actually sad about all this and you actually knew what you were talking about, you wouldn't care, you wouldn't give a hoot about assault weapons, as you call them. You wouldn't care about AR-15s, you wouldn't care about any of that. You would want to get rid of handguns, because handguns kill far more people in the United States than anything else. Far more, by many orders of magnitude. But you're not talking about those, are you? You're not talking about the ones that are concealed and they're there. The ones that some people actually use to protect themselves with, to save their own lives. You're not talking about those. You're talking about the weapons and the incidents that create headlines. Because that's all you care about. You don't care about people dying. You don't care about children. You don't care about Sandy Hook. You care about headlines. And you care about what you can get out of your comment from this situation. You disgust me. Crazy stuff, my friends. So you've seen two sides of an argument here. The anti-gun people, the anti-American people, the anti-freedom people. And I've been attacking them for the past, half an hour or so. Imagine, if you will, a scenario where that debate couldn't happen. Imagine a scenario where there was no room for dissenting opinions and there was no room for any counter view than what the government feeds you. Imagine if that were the world. Today, the California State Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing to address, quote, combating hate while protecting the Constitution. While the meeting sounds important, the Judicial Committee that organizes the hearing failed to incorporate a single conservative voice in any of the testimony, despite the fact that the right-wing and center-right speakers have been the one that are encountering hateful backlash, physical attacks on college campi in recent months. This is a piece, by the way, from the Daily Wire. The committee's background paper, I imagine reason for having this meeting, claims that there is evidence, quote-unquote evidence, both in terms of trends and individual incidents that overexpressionism of racism, overt expressions of racism and other forms of hatred are on the rise nationally and in California. While the paper does cite instances of violence against conservative and right-leaning speakers, it also implies a controversial tone and what they say speakers had to say. Now, I find this interesting. This is a part of this paper that they put out over the past year that followed similar patterns. In these instances, the people speaking or assembled did not explicitly or directly identify themselves as white supremacists or neo-Nazis. In some cases, organizers of the events publicly disavowed such groups. Whether or not the viewpoints expressed by those who did not identify as white supremacists could nonetheless be considered discriminatory, racist, or hateful is subject to debate. Oh, you say you're not a white supremacist. Oh, you say you're not in the KKK. But we know. Because of what you say, we know you love white supremacy and the Klan gi. You've probably got 5 of them. Many of them made of doilies. You know, from the summertime, because the doilies are airy. They're still white, but, you know, they breathe. So you've got a question of hate speech versus free speech happening in the California State Senate, and they don't want to hear the other side. They're not going to listen or hear the other side. Imagine a world. Imagine if hate speech became a thing here in the United States, and you could be shut down simply by saying something, quote, hateful, then the definition of what quantifies as hateful will strangely be expanded to the point where if you do not toe the line in the government views of what's right and wrong, if you dissent in any way, then you're endangered to the state. Then you're hateful to the state. I thought about it here, and I just sort of jotted down a couple of things. Imagine how far the left would go if there was no competing narrative acceptable, right? If no one could speak, if you just had to accept leftist views, if you were forced to by the government, because anything that disagrees with the left is considered hate speech and will throw you in prison for that. Imagine what the world would be like. Well, of course, you'd have no self-defense because they've already decided that you're not human and that you don't need guns and that people with guns are dangerous, and to say anything else is to be considered a dangerous person or possibly mentally ill, so your rights to self-defense simply go away. Personal property. You're not going to have any more of that now, are you? Because once you gain a certain level of personal property, then that in and of itself becomes evil. You become the evil rich because you didn't earn that. You stole it from somebody else. And if you can't dissent, you can't come out with a liturgy of things that you did to accomplish what you've accomplished in life and explain, I deserve these things. No, you can't do that. That would be dissent. And we have decided that by virtue of you having something, you are evil. You are the evil one. You are the evil doer. So we're just going to take that away from you. Personal property rights disappear. You don't have any health care, by the way. No, not going to have any of that. Because what happens is the government comes in and says, okay, we're going to provide health care for all, but we are the ones that get to decide what it means to have health care and who deserves health care and why. You know, if you're not paying for your health care, then someone else is paying for your health care, and they get to sort of decide what they're going to pay for and what they're not going to pay for, right? I mean, that's the way it's worked in every system around the world, save the United States. All of these government-controlled healthcare systems use rationing and prevent people from getting care. And if you fall outside of the lines, then you simply don't get care and you wither and die if you're too old, if you're too young, whatever it is, whatever they decide makes you outside of the group. Oh, you're too hateful. Then you don't get health care. So let's see. We've got no self-defense. We've got no personal property. We've got no health care. We've got no education. You know, the left has done a wonderful job in destroying whatever modicum of education system existed in the United States and turned it into a seminary for left-wing thought. And that's why they want to go younger and younger. Pre-K is about getting your kids away from you as quickly as possible in life. That way they can be brainwashed into following the dumb idiots that they spend most of their time with. Okay, that's what pre-K is about. The younger they can get to your kids, the quicker and more fully they can turn them against you. So, the education system sucks. They don't teach people how to read, write, do any sort of arithmetic. Most kids that graduate high school can't read it but at a third or sixth grade level, something like that. It's atrocious because they don't want them to be educated. They don't want them to want your children to have knowledge and power and abilities, because that when an individual, regardless of the tyranny that they live under, has tools, has knowledge, has power, has abilities, then that person can rise and acquire power within that society. They don't want that. It's the same reason why the slaves were never allowed to read. As a matter of fact, it was against the law to teach them to read, because slave owners knew that if they could read the white man's words, then they would become a danger. They might get some ideas in their head like they deserve freedom. And we can't have that. So your education system goes away. Religious belief or your freedom of conscience certainly doesn't exist anymore. As a matter of fact, it goes the other way, because it's more simple this way. The government will then create an edict of what is good, right, and holy, and you will believe this, and if you don't, you die. If you toe the line, you're fine. If you don't, you die. Period. It's a theocracy at that point. And it could be a godless theocracy. Just understand, your freedom of conscience is your decision on what is right and wrong. And when the government takes away your ability to make that decision, because there's no dissenting voices allowed, then essentially they have created a religion based on government as God. You must toe the official narrative. Science disappears. Science disappears. You know, many scientists were burned at the stake, called heretics, because their science, because their findings disagreed with doctrine. And there is no group of people on this planet that are less interested in facts, truth, and science than leftists. If the scientific dogma, the scientific doctrine, if the scientific evidence does not equate to their belief system, then it is disregarded. The scientific community today has understood this and understood the left has the government and a whole lot of money and certainly academia behind them. So they sort of dictate what will be approved as science, you see, through money. That's what they do today. You got a lot of leftist scientists out there doing a lot of leftist science, and strangely, they come up with leftist points of view in their science. Why? Because that's who's paying them. So simply, the concept of science disappears. The concept of using reason to find facts disappears because those facts will not be allowed if they disagree with the narrative. You will have no humanity. You don't get to defend yourself. You don't get to think for yourself. And you're owned by somebody else. You basically do what you're told. You're no longer human. What you want, what you think, what you feel, what you experience as an entity, as a being, as this flesh-covered brain, no longer matters in society. Your humanity is gone. You become a slave. You know, it's strange. You go through all those things, and It is, I don't know, just the worst parts of communism? Just the worst parts? It's not just happening in the United States of America, my friends. It's happening all over the world. Watching stream terror content on the web will be a criminal offense now under a new crackdown unveiled today. The latest crackdown against IS, Home Secretary Amber Rudd, this is a lady here, will close a loophole that allows people to freely watch vile propaganda. Currently, law only forbids downloading the material, but senior officials say that they can now identify cases where people watch without first transferring the footage to their own PC. The move comes after tech giants were last night urged to, quote, face up to their moral responsibility to boot ISIS off the internet in a furious blast from Ms. Rudd. These tech giants need to step down and do more to take moral responsibility for the fact that their platforms are being used in this way. You're the reason you're terrorists in and of yourself. Well, it's real simple. What is terrorist content? We understand what it is today. When we see it, that's certainly ISIS or Al-Qaeda or one of those guys conducting some sort of terrorist act. Pretty scary. So fine, we give in. Okay, 15 years, you can't even watch that stuff because we like to burn books here in Great Britain now. We're just like Nazi Germany. We like to burn books. And you can't watch that stuff anymore, and everybody agrees with it. Fine, because, look, it's just terrorist content. It's not good for your brain anyway. You don't need to be watching it. We're just going to ban it. Okay, and then people go along with it. Fine. And next thing you know, you've got this little seed of a rule in there. You've got a law that's just sitting there going, well, we haven't had any terrorist activity on the internet for a while, so, I wonder what we could use this for. Terrorism is simply a political motivation based on bad dudes. So if there's some political bad dudes out there, we can just call anything they say terrorist propaganda, and we can ban them from the internet. Yay! Doesn't that sound like fun? Some great reasons to ban people from the internet. Wow! Why didn't we think of this earlier? Eventually, the scope of what is considered terrorist content will be any speech that is in opposition of the state or the official narrative. Britain is no longer a free country. Probably hasn't been for such a long time. Friends, grow up. The world is a dangerous place. There's nothing we can do that will make it less dangerous. To think we can is to put ourselves in the position of God, and you are not God, nor am I. The only thing we can do is deal with things as they come at us. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, but it is what it is. Why are some people born blind? Why are some people born with horrible diseases that we don't even have names for? They don't deserve it, but it is what it is. Life is not fair. Fairness is a word for children. And we can't solve these problems by stripping people of their humanity. We will only create more and more dangerous problems in the future. The world is a dangerous, horrible, horrible place. And you never know what sort of things are going to happen to you, even when you're just out on your boat. Oh, yeah, we just get a rowboat out here, going to take the wifey and the GoPro camera. And where it's a beautiful water, it's a nice day. You see the sunshine? It's great. And you got the GoPro camera. We don't even have to swim. And we're going to stick it in the water, and we're going to film fish. That sounds like fun. We'll put it on the internet. Get 1 million hits. It'll be great. Terrifying footage captured the moment the man experienced being devoured by a ravenous shark. Well, sort of. Guy's name is Raymond. He was filming underwater during a feeding frenzy of lemon sharks, pretty harmless sharks, during a recent fishing trip. But suddenly the fisherman found himself surrounded by ravenous bull sharks instead. much bigger sharks, much more aggressive. And by the way, when he says he's surrounded, the boat that he was actually in at the time was surrounded. He had a GoPro camera stuck into the water on a stick, little selfie stick. And, selfie stick's in the water. And the bull shark says, looks good. Yeah, here he goes. Oh, God. Now it's in his throat. Look at that. Now it's just kind of, maybe he's choking on it here. Oh, wait, this really tastes awful. What did you put on this? It's too damn spicy. It's kind of a weird, I'm surprised he didn't go any further. You would think. Maybe he's just playing. I don't know. It'd be more like a dog shark, wouldn't it? I don't think bulls really play. They're pretty serious about stuff. Maybe he just didn't like to be filmed. Maybe, okay, that's what it is. The shark didn't want, get out of here. He didn't want to be filmed. He's like Antifa. Shark doesn't like cameras. Wow. I have to go look back at some of this Antifa. There's all this footage with the young kids today ripping cameras out and attacking cameramen out there. We really need to go back and look at some of that footage to see if, possibly there's something we missed.
Fucking walk away.
See, I told you. They're all over the place. Sometimes it's even cops.
This is a public parking lot. You guys are not welcome here on private property.
See, I didn't know how cops get badges. Or sharks get badges. I have no idea. And I don't know. You would think the people out there that use the First Amendment as, part of their job, their livelihood would be a little bit different. But apparently they've got some shark buddies too.
Did your news agency intentionally send you down when this was over so that they could portray it as being less people here? Because there was like 500 people here earlier.
So we just found out about it.
Really? And you guys are the news?
Yeah, see, don't film me. We're here creating the propaganda. We don't need you, buddy. All right, that is it. Show's over, my friends. Wrapping things up. Thank you much for joining the Michael Newman program. Please go to the website, michaelnewmanproductions.com. You can keep in contact with me and get the links to all the stories we talked about today in the blog section. You can contact me and check out some of the services that we do, some of the services that I do for you right there on the website. You can also go to Twitter. Newmaniac1 is my Twitter handle. If you do that, then, you'll know when new content comes out on the website in very short order. Plus, please support the show on Patreon. Go to the website, click the support icon, and you can support me on Patreon. You can just go to patreon.com/MNP and support me as well. Have a great afternoon.
Wow, see ya!